So I want to begin this morning by sharing with you something that the legendary cellist Pablo Casals once said when he was asked at age 90 why in the world he continued playing the cello. And he said, "Because I think I'm making progress." And isn't that awesome? I mean, he was already a legend. I mean, some people say he was the greatest of all time, right, if you're familiar with his work. But he was humble. He was humble enough to understand the power of progress. Now, I don't know about you, but I pray that I am making progress. I do. And I pray this because I know that as long as I'm making progress, even if they're just baby steps, I know that God is not finished with me yet. Right? And I find that very comforting. Can anybody relate? Okay, so turn to your neighbor and just say, "God is not finished with me yet." And so today, we are going to look at the divine idea of progress. Because when you understand that you are, that I am, that we are all a work in progress, you really start to understand the real point, which is progress, not perfection. Let's say that together. Progress, not perfection, right? Now, most of us probably remember that famous line from Forrest Gump, "Life is like..." Yes. But is it really? Now, for me, life's a bit more like a construction project, right? And here's what I mean by that. We build our lives one day at a time while we're dealing with all kinds of moments of messiness and bent nails and foundation issues. Can anyone relate? Amen? And so we are in a constant state of learning how to course correct, to do the work to maintain the best practices for our construction site, right? So we're not building a house of pancakes and, constantly trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. Are you with me? Yeah. Now, this is why no construction plan is ever perfect. No construction plan is ever perfect. I mean, it might look good on paper, right? But until you do it, until you do the work, you have no idea what is in store. Think of it this way. It's kind of like the difference between reading 100 books on parenting and then actually parenting, right? So if you leave with nothing else today, please take this with you. Never in the history of all things was there a perfect construction plan or parenting plan, right? One is theory and the other is application. It's real life application, and it's a world of difference. I'm sure you agree. But therein lies the actual foundational cracks, because somehow in there's an idea that, being perfect is what we're supposed to be going for, what we're supposed to try to strive for, as if perfectionism is achievable. Perfectionism is not achievable. Now, there will be missteps in your project, and there will be setbacks in your project. That's just a part of the journey. So you have to give yourself the space and the grace to just think of them as par for the course. So I'm going to hit the pause button here for a minute, and let's just take a look at what perfectionism really is and why it's so easy. Now, I'm not talking to you. I'm sure you have no issue with this. But why perfectionism is something that we can get sucked into so easily. So perfectionism isn't so much a specific behavior as it is an internal hatchet job, right, that we do to ourselves. So let me just repeat that last part again. We do it to ourselves. Oh, let's say that together. We do it to ourselves. In other words, it's a destructive way to think about yourself because, it kind of puts you on a hamster wheel that you will run yourself ragged on. And it kills your joy. It is a joy killer, right? Because perfectionism is not achievable. Let's say that together. Perfectionism is not achievable. For example, now think about Michael Jordan. Now, he is one of the greatest basketball players of all time. And so here's something that he shared, and I think this is a great perspective. He said, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the winning shot and missed. I have failed over and over and over again. Now, I share this with you because there really is a fine line between striving for excellence, which is great, and then getting stuck or sucked down some kind of sinkhole of self-sabotage, am I talking to anyone, where you're judging yourself so harshly about your supposed failures. Now, this is exactly why Anne Wilson Schaefer said, perfectionism is self-abuse of the highest order. Think about that. Perfectionism is self-abuse of the highest order. For instance, the lie of perfectionism will tell you it's either all or nothing. The truth of progress will assure you, I'll get better. The lie of perfectionism will tell you this has to be done immediately. But the truth of progress will assure you, I'm in this for the long term, right? The lie of perfectionism will tell you this isn't good enough. But the truth of progress will assure you that done is better than perfect. Anybody? The lie of perfectionism will tell you failure is unacceptable, but the truth of progress will assure you failure isn't permanent or personal. And we can always say to ourselves, you know what? I'll learn and grow. I'll give myself some space and grace, and I will learn and grow. So now, do you hear the difference between the lie and the truth? Yeah? Now, in the Gospel of John, our master teacher and our way shower, Jesus, he talks about it this way. He said, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. To steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. So the deeper meaning here is that anything that's got you running on that hamster wheel of despair, which is based in fear, doubt, and worry, it's like a thief. And that thief will steal your confidence, your creativity, and most of all, your happiness if you let it. But Jesus has other plans. Now, the teaching here is that he came to show us how to live life abundantly. And living life abundantly means not buying into that soul-sucking lie that you were meant to be perfect. You are not. Isn't that a relief? How many of you are relieved right now? Yes, thank you. Now, that said, dun, 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 I want to go back to something that I mentioned earlier about learning how to course correct, right? How to do the work to maintain the best practices on that construction site. In other words, how do you get off the hamster wheel, and how do you send that thief away absolutely empty-handed? Anybody interested in knowing about that? Now, before I share this with you, though, I want to acknowledge that I know that you hear me say this a lot, right? I know you hear me say this a lot. And the reason that you hear me say this a lot is because it is as simple as it is profound. Here it is. It works if you work it together. It works if you work it. Or as Edwin Gaines says, it only works if you do it. I mean, you can come every Sunday, you can come to small group, you can take a bit, you can do it all. But unless you do it, what's it for? Right? Now, think of it this way. Let's say you've got all the ingredients to bake a cake. And you've got your recipe, and you've got your trusty oven all ready to go, right? But what happens if you just throw all of those ingredients into the stove without doing the work to follow the recipe? Or what happens if you don't even bother to turn the heat on? Well, I'll tell you what happens. You end up with a big old mess, right? You just end up with a big mess. This is why it works if you work it is really just the best recipe for a delicious life. It's like saying, hey, if you want a cake to turn out sweet and scrumptious, then you got to do the work, right? You got to follow the recipe. You got to preheat the oven, and you have to mix the ingredients correctly. Amen? And so it is with your life. All this talk about cakes is reminding me that the Great British Bake Off is starting a new season, right, from across the pond where they don't have a writer's strike or an actor's strike. And if there was ever an example of work in progress or progress, not perfection, it definitely is watching these amazing amateur bakers transform into star bakers, right? Are there any British Bake Off fans here? Anybody? Yes. So, whether it's the signature bake or the technical bake or the big showstopper right at the end of each episode, they stretch themselves so far beyond anything that they thought they could ever do. And they do it with so much heart and laughter and sometimes tears, right? But you know what? They may not realize it, but they are definitely striving for excellence, but they're also practicing progress, not perfection. I mean, if you tune in week after week, first of all, you will fall in love. You will fall in love with these contestants. They're just so lovely and quirky and creative and wonderful. But you'll see each baker making progress. Even when they're eliminated from the contest, they have still made so much progress, which is also why it's pretty rare for them to make the same mistake twice, right? I mean, they definitely seem to understand the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. And right, so you're familiar with that? Are you? Oh. So insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, but expecting a different result. Don't do that. Now, I want to share a poem with you, and this comes from Portia Nelson. And it really helps illustrate this idea that we don't have to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, because we can let go of our old patterns. We can do that. Now, I'm not saying we won't have a fall or two, right? But we don't have to stay in that. We can definitely climb back out. So now, if you have heard this before, I invite you to hear it with fresh ears today. And if it's new to you, well, then you are in for a treat. This is autobiography in 5 chapters. Chapter 1, I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find my way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend that I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I am in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. But now my eyes are open. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. The end. Now, I share this powerful little story with you because we have all been there. Some of us are there. Amen? And so I want you to remember that you might fall into a hole in chapter 1. You might, in some kind of certain situation in your life. But you can always win. Always. You can always choose to walk down a completely different street in chapter 5. But you're also the writer of your own story, so you don't have to wait till chapter 5, right? You can do a rewrite in the middle of chapter 1. That is what work in progress looks like. And so, I leave you with this. Your heart work this week, your action step, is to follow the advice of that legendary cellist, Pablo Casals, that I shared with you earlier, who at age 90 was still practicing principle, right? He knew to put into practice what he loved, and he didn't take it for granted. He didn't become complacent about it. He understood progress. Progress is always in motion. You always have the momentum for that. So you are a work in progress. I am a work in progress. We are all a work in progress because God is not finished with us yet. And so ends our message for today. Thank you.